Hello, human peoples. You're listening to the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. To support us and gain access to great exclusive podcasts like Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and our latest show, Spiel Boys, head over to patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. We do game streaming, movie nights with our patrons every Friday night, and you can even commission your own podcast about anything you want. Literally anything, within reason, and we have to do it. You are quite frankly out of excuses not to go visit patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds.
Yep. We're traveling back in time.
February of 1989.
Ooh, yeah. Hey, everyone.
Hello.
My name is David Bell.
My name
Genuinely forgot.
It's Tom Ryan.
This morning. It's morning, folks. And we just watched The Burbs.
The Boybs.
The Boybs.
The Boybs.
It's got one of them little dashes before the B.
Deburbs.
Morning, Walter! Spend a quiet week at home with Tom Hanks in The Burbs. It's a comedy about what happens to an ordinary neighborhood when a very unordinary family moves in.
Deburbs.
This is a big movie for me as a kid, and just in terms of it got watched a lot in my house. And
Samesies.
I did not understand that The Burbs was an abbreviation for the suburbs for a very long time.
Okay, so I legitimately might be right there with you. We're stupid. We were stupid kids. That's what I'm hearing.
I don't think it clicked until I was a teenager and revisited it.
Ooh, that's a shame.
Yeah. Well, I just, anyway.
Yeah. Hey, Vincent.
Hey, Vincent.
With a Y. Thank you so much for having us watch The Burbs, a movie, we have both seen many, many, many times.
Yeah.
This is like having us watch like Clue, right? Where it's like, oh, I've seen this on Comedy Central and every channel. I've seen it on VHS.
It's not quite the same as Clue, but
no.
Yeah.
But yeah, Vincent, thank you so much. Vince is our Patreon producer who ordered us to watch this movie.
Commanded us.
Yeah, this Tom Hanks movie that was filmed during the 1988 writers' strike. I learned they were just finishing the script as the strike started. So there's a lot of improv on set, is what I read.
I see. Okay, yeah, you can kind of tell.
Yeah,
not necessarily in a bad way, but like anyway, we'll get to it.
Yeah. I was going to say a weird era in comedy, and I realized every era is kind of weird era. This is the same year as Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. It's got that Edward Scissorhands vibe, right? Haunted House in Suburbia. Who's the real monster?
Yeah, it's a real cul-de-sac.
High concept.
It's real cul-de-sac paranoia. It's almost like a 50s Cold War movie. It's a lot like... I forget there's a very famous Twilight Zone episode where it's just about like a cul-de-sac, and they think one of the people there is an alien. It's a theme they did a lot, but like this is very much Joe Dante, who's the director of Gremlins and Matinee and a bunch of other things you've probably seen if you're
only those two,
a horror person. Small Soldiers, American Werewolf, right? No, that's Landis. Werewolf is Landis.
Yeah.
Howling.
Yeah. Right. And it's Thomas Hanks.
Yeah. So it's the point was it feels very much like a drive-in 50s movie done through the lens of 1980s comedy, that sort of like weird, like you were saying. There's always a lot of like sub periods of each genre in any given decade or whatever, and like one of the weird 80s ones was like sort of like kind of like the high concept kind of macabre, like Ghostbusters and like this movie and Gremlins and a lot of Joe Dante stuff actually. So this is like very firmly one of those movies.
Yes. And it's pretty stacked. It's got Corey Feldman, Carrie Fisher,
Bruce Dern.
Bruce Dern, yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot. And
a bunch of Joe Dante regulars, like Rick Ducommun is the sidekick neighbor, and then of course Dick Miller and Robert Picardo have cameos as garbage men.
I was about to say they are both in Star Trek. Dick Miller is in the famous DS9 episode where they go back to 2024 and they're like, can you imagine homeless camps? And I'm like, yes, I can.
Sure can.
Deep Space Nine. Yeah, he's in that. He plays a guard. And then Robert Picardo is, of course, in Voyager.
Obviously, he's the Doctor.
Yeah, that was one moment I hadn't thought about, and because I watched a lot of Voyager and DS9 since rewatching this, and I was sitting there with Hannah, and I was just like, what the fuck? When they showed up, it's like, what are they doing in this?
Well, he used to be just kind of like a Joe Dante regular. Like, after he plays the main werewolf in The Howling, and then Joe Dante would just kind of stick him in his movies.
Yeah.
Like, I think he's in, a bunch of these people are in Gremlins 2 as well.
Yep. I have been where they filmed this. I didn't realize that.
Right, it's supposed to be in the Midwest. They like zoom in on the United States map in the beginning to show like we're like, I don't know, in Michigan or maybe Wisconsin or Illinois, but it's very clearly Los Angeles.
Oh yeah, more like zoom onto the Universal backlot. This is the Universal. So Universal Studios, and I worked there for a bit. They have a cul-de-sac that they literally just have for, filming
movies.
Like
it's
the Gilmore Girls or whatever. Was shot at this same cul-de-sac.
Wasn't
the Munsters?
Desperate Housewives filmed? Oh, no,
That's the one. That's the one I'm thinking of. Desperate Housewives. I think the Munsters, the house that the neighbor. I forget this actor's name. The one we haven't mentioned. The third neighbor. The little motherfucker who gets electrocuted. His house, I believe, is the Munsters' house.
It's Rick Ducommun.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that it sounded like it was probably what I was reading about it is it sounded like they had a lot of fun filming it, and I think one of the reasons why is probably because they just drove into the Universal backlot every day to this like little exclusive suburb. They didn't have to deal with locals. They didn't have to deal with anything. It's just like, this is our playground, and it all takes place in this one cul-de-sac.
Yep, it never leaves the cul-de-sac.
Yeah. In terms of tone, so I had this thing where I was like, this is such a weird.
We haven't said, we're 6 minutes in. How do you like this movie, Dave?
Oh, that's a hard question. It's always been here with me.
Yeah.
I like
it's always been there for me.
Yeah, exactly. Like I like it because what else would I do? Like I grew up with this movie.
Yeah,
I like this movie. I recognize that this movie was it's a cult classic, meaning that it was not well liked at the time.
No.
And I recognize that this movie fails.
Yes, it does.
Mainly, this is one of two movies that Tom Hanks made about how the Satanic Panic is right. And that's weird, right? That he's made two?
A little strange. That's the wildest thing about this movie, I think. I do still like this movie, and I do think it's kind of good in spite of itself, because I think this is probably the best Joe Dante's direction has ever been.
Oh yeah, and I actually, so we should talk about the ending for sure.
The ending is really where it. There's problems throughout. Like one of the biggest problems of the movie is the main characters are aggressively unlikable, but that's working toward a purpose in the end, towards what I feel like must have been the original ending, where Tom Hanks has the meltdown and melts down on his neighbors, where he's like, we're the fucking freaks.
We're the monsters.
We're the monsters.
We are legend.
Like the movie was clearly building towards that.
Right. They're slowly destroying these people's house and their neighborhood under the xenophobia and suspicion. I want to note something. So like it feels like it's of an era. And I want to note that, this type of comedy has always existed, to the point that I realized that this is a reverse What We Do in the Shadows. Like, this is basically What We Do in the Shadows, but from the neighbor's perspective. What We Do in the Shadows is a group of vampires in this creepy house in a regular neighborhood, and the neighbors are clueless, right?
Yeah, you're right.
In this one, it's a group of creeps, and the neighbors aren't clueless, and it's from the neighbor's perspective. I just think that's interesting, is that you look at comedy now, and you're like, it's not that much different. The weird shit we choose to explore. Like this feels like such a weird idea. And then you think about comedy in general, like it's always been weird shit like this, and it always will be.
Yeah.
And I think this movie, I don't know if this is true, but I think this movie is one of those movies that, like, if we didn't get this movie, maybe we didn't get What We Do in the Shadows, Maybe this is paving the way for those.
To a degree, I think there's a more direct connection between something like Fright Night and What We Do in the Shadows. This is close to Fright Night, but the vibe is a little different because, like, Fright Night, it's not a mystery, right? He's explicitly a vampire.
He sure is.
So,
And sometimes he's Colin Farrell.
occasionally he's Colin Farrell, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
This one is more about the mystery and the suspicion.
We covered a movie not too long ago called Bug. And I just
Sure
need to
did,
point
Dave.
out that it literally starts the same way. Bug started with a helicopter shot showing look how isolated they are.
Mm-hmm.
This starts with the mother of all helicopter shots, starting from space.
From the
show,
Universal logo.
Yeah, they're showing like they are in the middle of nowhere. They're middle America.
So Dave, hold on, just real quick. So that means canonically, this takes place on the Universal logo.
Oh, you're right. It does.
So there's a few other movies that do. Waterworld.
Got it.
Doom.
Got it. Yeah, this all checks out. Like this Doom. This movie, then Doom, then Waterworld in order of what happened, right?
Yes.
Because I assume Doom, they were on their way to Waterworld.
Yeah.
There's more. Isn't the Mummy? Oh no, that's like the logo turns into the sun or something.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So that's more like
different...
a fade. Yeah, it's a fade.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
It's pretty chill. There are definitely more. These are just the ones that are immediately popping off the top of my head.
Yeah.
So keep track of that canon, the number of movies that takes place within the Universal logo.
That's pretty great. They never talk about how the word Universal is rotating them.
No.
And I feel like they should.
And that music must be loud as fuck.
I know. Every morning, and you're like,
but just like so that it can be heard across the globe.
Yeah.
Like whales hear that shit.
Yeah, like the fucking Rapture. You know, like
that's what they were writing about. That's the trumpet. It's just the fucking Universal tag.
Yeah, it's just the first note.
Yeah.
And it takes so long. Yeah. Oh, amazing. We just made lore.
That's what's happening at the end of Red State, Dave.
Yeah, it's the Universal logo. You're right.
It's the Universal logo firing up, signaling a new day.
Oh, fuck. But yeah, Bug and this similar films, because they're both about isolated, bored people who start forming conspiracies.
Who start spiraling.
Yeah, and it's about like the whole story about the ice cream guy who snaps and the realization we're the
guy.
People who
we're
snap.
that guy. Like that guy didn't. Yeah, there's so many good spots of direction. And when Rick Ducommun art, the really just insufferable neighbor character, is telling this story, is one of the better scenes
of Skip.
Yeah, when he's telling the story about Skip, the soda jerk, the ice cream fountain guy who went crazy back in the 50s and murdered his whole family. But the direction of the scene where he's telling the story is so good, and it really isn't much. It's just like, it just kind of reminds me of like, oh, remember when they'd let a scene breathe? Because like they don't cut around. They just let it's all on the strength of the actor's performance of the story. And it's man, I really love Joe Dante's direction in this movie. That's just one scene.
It's really good. The music too.
The music is great. It's Jerry Goldsmith. He just lets that scene breathe and lets it just be about a guy telling a scary story, and it's so like classic horror. Like he's really having fun with classic horror in this movie. All like the shadow, like the silhouette shots, and like all of the lightning illuminating things, and just like the different shots of people peeking out their windows, looking at stuff, and like people digging holes in the rain and shit. It's all very, very 50s camp, like very 50s drive-in.
Oh, absolutely. By the way, Jerry Goldsmith, you might know from the Universal Pictures theme.
Oh, no shit. Yeah.
Yeah, he did the horn.
I feel like I did know that in the bottom of my brain. Yeah.
Yeah, he's been, he's been around the block.
Yep.
Yeah.
Rest in power, Jerry Goldsmith.
Oh, yeah. One imagines he's dead, right? If he's done the Universal thing.
He is, yeah.
That's
passed.
an old motherfucker.
He did the Star Trek, Dave. You know this.
Yeah, I know. Oh, I know. He did TNG. And I know me some Jerry Goldsmith.
Yeah, The Omen.
Yep. God, he's so good.
Batman Forever.
Oh my fucking god! Yeah, and the Burbs, and
the
he's doing it wonderfully
Burbs.
because it's like the organ creepy music, which I always love. I always love that music when it's done, even like, seriously, like non-ironically, like the weird reference, the House on Haunted Hill remake, like the opening theme has like organ music, and
Oh, yeah.
it's like I love it when they're because it is, I think, a creepy instrument, and I know it's overdone as a horror instrument, obviously, but it's overdone because in my mind it works.
It's effective, yeah.
Yeah, this movie creeped me out as a kid. Obvious, like when
Well,
you're
yeah,
a dumb
it's a
little
little
kid.
creepy, yeah.
That dream sequence when
The
he's
dream
watching.
sequence is fucked. Yeah.
Yeah, when he's watching the television playing, apparently they're having just an awesome marathon where in one channel they're playing The Exorcist and the next they're playing fucking Texas Chainsaw 2. And I was like, Jesus Christ. Good
Oh, yeah.
night. Good night for
it's just-
TV.
it's just like Joe Dante showing all of his buds horror movies. I mean, I don't know if he's friends with William Friedkin, but
Oh, yeah, but like might as well shout it out. It's also the
Yeah.
theme. You know, like
Right,
they put
like
on
every-
Mr. Rogers.
right, almost every time a TV is on, it's a horror movie or it's a movie about like suspicion.
Right.
Except and
Or
then
Mr.
the ones or it's
Rogers.
Mr. Rogers, yeah.
But Mr. Rogers is literally about accepting the people in your neighborhood.
Yes, yeah.
Despite where they come from. Mr. Rogers is famously, civil rights and shit like that, where he it was all about accepting someone no matter what. And this movie is about being weirded out by, weird foreign people, basically, is
Well,
the
also
idea.
With the
It's
exception that
middle class suburban fear,
getting spun up by the media. Like it's
Yeah.
the media aspect is real subtle in this, but it, obviously the Cold War, it was made in 88. It had to have been because it released in February of 89. And we're still in the Cold War at that point, or we're just coming out of it. But like, obviously this was written, so it still feels like a Cold War thing. All that suspicion and paranoia is in there. So that's really the main focus. But the media stuff is real subtle with the horror movies on in the background all the time.
Oh, yeah. And then they make them children, right? They do a bunch of parts where they're like competing lawns. Have I showed you my tools, like toys? Obviously the part where it's like, can he come out and play? They're
and then
hanging out with Corey Feldman. His son is the one who like spins them off. Like the son is like, I saw them in the backyard. So it's like they generally act like kids.
There's one
and
point where they're walking up. It's Art and Hanks are walking up the door to talk to the Klopeks, and Bruce Stern points out they're literally daring each other to go ring the doorbell.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course their wives are like stand-ins for their mothers.
Yes, yeah.
I would say I know what they were trying to do, but I do think that's one of the reasons this kind of like is like this is the women are like a little too clueless. I would say in this, like Carrie Fisher, I'm like, come on, it's Carrie Fisher, she knows better than this. But that like it's kind of part of the fable of it all. I think is what they're trying to do there. But it's this endless rubbernecking, right? Where it's like they're rubbernecking the neighbors, and then their neighbors are rubbernecking them. Corey Feldman is having a party to show, so it's this boredom upon boredom.
Yeah, it's
and
like
all these like
boredom inception, like layers of boredom.
And they're all just like rubbernecking the neighbors, and they're all acting like little kids, and they've just spun themselves out into this paranoia.
Yeah, this
by the way,
fantasy,
the part
this
where
like
they
summertime fantasy that kids invent when they're off of school. Like
Exactly.
The movie starts with Tom Hanks is taking a vacation and he's just spending it at home.
Yeah.
And Carrie Fisher is like, we should go away to the lake because if you're just sitting here, you're just gonna get obsessed about something.
Yeah, and he's like, no, of course not. And then sure enough, the part where they're like, can he come out? And she says, he won't come out until he resembles the man I married. And the answer, Carol, we don't have that kind of time, is a great, by the way, just great line.
There's some good good lines in this. There's some good lines in this,
yeah.
and a lot of it does feel like improv.
Well, yeah, the one that I learned was improv that I really love is Tom Hanks getting on the gurney at the end.
Oh,
like
you could tell that was. You could tell that
yeah,
was.
this is great.
And the camera just follows him. Like he lays on the gurney. He's like, I've been blown. Like he's
I
had
want to
it.
go to the hospital.
I've been
I'm going to
blown
the
up. I
hospital.
want to go to the hospital, and nobody comes. So he gets off the gurney and picks it up and throws it into the ambulance and jumps on it. And the camera
It's
stays
so
with him.
good. Yeah.
But it's so like it's so erratic, and it's probably like because those things are heavier than you think.
Oh
So,
yeah,
like,
he probably hurt himself.
he almost certainly hurt himself. So it's like he does it so violently that it's like there's no way they like okayed this before he did it.
Yeah. And again, no writers. The writer couldn't be there on set, obviously.
He does have a
there's
cameo, apparently.
Oh, no shit. But yeah, it wasn't a SAG strike, so he could cameo. Like, it seems like it wasn't like, I don't know how this writer strike went, but clearly this wasn't made through bitterness, you know? And that's usually how it goes, right? It's the studios they're striking against, not the fucking actors and directors.
And the workers, like all the...
Yeah, so it sounded like they had a good time. So yeah, like it's this general idea of this paranoia, bored summer nights. It's very nostalgic, even though I never grew up in a suburb. It's like these warm summer nights. They're outside, they're having a great time, and it's just like that's a big part. And also because, you know, shit. Oh, I saw this as a kid too, so it's nostalgic.
Yeah.
And then the neighbors, what I love is that the escalation, when you realize, like, the first thing they see that convinces Tom Hanks is the neighbor, who is, by the way, the kid from Children of the Corn. I didn't realize that. That's fucking the main kid in Children of the Corn.
Oh, Elias? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Something like that.
He comes out to take out the trash, and he drives the car to the end of the driveway and then smacks the trash, and the music is making it look really sinister. When you think about it, it's definitely weird, but he literally, Tom Hanks says, I've never seen that before. Yeah. And I love that, like, that's the convincing thing, because it's showing that it's like
I've never seen this before, therefore anything you've been saying is possible.
Exactly. And it's like what you're seeing is just weird. But it's
just kind of weird. But it could be anything. Maybe the guy has a back problem and can't carry the trash to the curb. And maybe he was just overly enthusiastic about smashing the garbage down, but it does have to be in the can or else. Yeah. Could be having a bad night. It does have to be in the can or else they won't pick it up.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, they start losing their mind. They dump trash in front of their house. They later tear their wallpaper, and they ultimately blow up their house.
They break into the house and blow up the house. Yeah.
Yeah, they're victimizing these people. There's another similarity to Bug, by the way. His neighbor says to him early on, he says, once they get in your head, it's over. And it reminds me very much of Michael Shannon claiming there are bugs in his head. Because you realize, like, oh yeah, I guess they are in your head, just not in the way
in
you're
the literal
thinking.
It's funny that we're doing like kind of a co-discussion of bug here, but like in the literal sense that a bug is a thing that starts as a minor annoyance but then becomes a point of obsession to the point where, you know, it's a trope where you'll like destroy yourself to get rid of this minor annoyance.
Right. And so
or this thing you just can't let go of.
Yeah, so they're setting it all up. Like, they're in your head. And it's like, yeah, they are in his head. He can't get over the fact that they're weird. And then, of course, he watches Exorcist Texas Chainsaw, has the dream with Satan is our pal chant.
Yeah, and a chainsaw.
Yeah, and the little dog axe, I love.
Yeah, with the little dog had a little axe in its head, too. Was really funny.
And at this point, their neighbor is missing, and he's an old man, and they just assume they killed him. And this is where he leaves the "I have your dog" note, which is always funny.
Walter, I have your dog. And then at the end of the movie, they're like, "You left this man a ransom note for his dog."
So good, because that in the moment, he's just trying to write a note explaining himself,
explaining where the dog is, right? Because the dog is loose.
Every explanation makes them sound like
maniacs. Yeah.
Maniacs. So then, Walter, I have your dog. And you know at the time, you're like, well, that makes you sound even more like a maniac. And so, it's this like snowball because they're like, we think they killed Walter because there's, they find his wig, his rug later, and his mail. And like, you can, again, if you stop for a second, go, maybe they're collecting his mail for him. Like neighborly, maybe they're being neighborly, and so like all this shit has obvious explanations that they're just skipping over, and it's just spinning out of control, and we just get so much fun and games with them. And I actually think this is one of the problems of the movie. It kind of meanders.
Oh, like,
it's kind of for a while.
It's very formless.
Yeah, it's kind of just like them spying on the neighbors, and it kind of escalates, but not much. I think in the halfway point, or even in the first act, like at one point they go over and they have, they meet them.
That's at the halfway point. That's 45 minutes in. Yeah.
And it's kind of like very slow, where it's like they just keep sneaking in, looking
feels
over.
Like when you pointed out that it was made during a writer's strike, it kind of feels like first drafty, where they're trying to, not too much, but it's enough of stuff where it feels like they're just kind of spinning their wheels, or they don't really have because like I said, the movie feels a little bit formless. It does seem to just kind of go from like, okay, and then this happens, and then this happens, until it ultimately is like they break into their house. They break into their house the day after they go over and meet them, and that's the finale. Like the break-in is the end of the film. Like the break-in escalates to them trying to dig up the basement, and Tom Hanks hits a gas line and blows up the house, and that's the end.
Yeah, it's kind of like, so a comparison in my mind is Sandlot, if 90% of the movie was them trying to get the ball. Does that make sense? Where it's like Sandlot knew we can't have the whole movie be them trying to get the ball. And so when you watch that movie, you realize like, oh, it's a coming of age. It's first this kid trying to be a part of this group, learning about baseball, then playing baseball, and then you have the Beast Legend. And I think the ball stuff only happens like halfway.
It's around like Act 2, yeah. It's although if you remember, they
foreshadow it.
They sold the Sandlot. Like the commercials made it seem like the entire movie was going to be they tried to make it seem like it was going to be a bunch of kids trying to home alone a big dog to get their ball back.
But I think they knew you can't make a whole movie, because it's like, how many attempts are we going to get, And this movie feels like the opposite, where it's like, it's almost all of them just like, we got to get in there. We got to get in there. And like, we got to find out what's going on. Let's like, they knock on the door, the bees come. They do the note, and the note gets thrown back. I feel like they break in, they go to visit, and while the other one breaks in, and then they finally break in, and it's just like attempt after attempt. So it just feels, it feels very repetitive and meandering. They should have known they're on the level. The dog is so well groomed. They're big fucking Great Dane. I was like, that's not an evil dog, but
it looks too nice.
And so, finally they blow up their house. They basically, we get this ending where they're like, no, these are very well-respected professors. Like, I know the guy has Nazi face. I looked up the actor who plays the main, like, ghoul. Yeah. He has absolutely played Nazis before, because he has Nazi face. Like,
isn't he the Nazi in the Blues Brothers?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
He just, that's why they use him. But like, they turn out to be very respected, and the idea is like, no, in the end, the monsters were Tom Hanks and all these suburbanites. But then the movie does something, and I mean, everybody
should have been the ending.
Well, here's the problem, because if that was the ending, that actually kind of sucks too. Like that was the thing that I ran into watching this.
It may or may not have sucked, but like, it at least was the ending to the movie that we had been watching. Like, that was what it was clearly building towards.
Mm-hmm. The problem is that, I think what it is that, like, you watch this movie and you're like, it's kind of meandering. If you don't like the charisma of the actors and any of the jokes, then you're not going to like this movie, period. Right? It's just them doing this thing over and over again, and the whole time, like, they're the assholes, right? Like, they're being assholes.
Yeah.
And so at the end, when he's like, no, don't you get, we're assholes. And then if the movie ended, you'd be like, well, why did I watch that? Like, I don't know. It's like it's almost like one of them needs to become... It's a statement,
Yeah,
but it's almost like one of them needs to get so obsessive that they become a villain, and there's a final... Like, it feels like there needs to be a final confrontation still. And that was the thing, is like, maybe if one of the neighbors got so obsessive that they had to like fight off that neighbor if he became Skip, essentially, like actually start killing people or something. But it feels like I can see them looking at that script and going like, and then what? And they probably didn't mean to, but they were probably like, so what, where does this go? How can we like punctuate this? And they're like, oh, I got it. What if they actually are evil? And it undercuts everything.
The entire movie, yeah. I wonder
in
if
a way
a lot
you
of
could
that
argue is funny and nihilistic. Like you could argue like, oh yeah, they're doing it because fuck it, we're making a comedy. And this became a cult classic, but you can sort of see why people watching would be like, what the fuck is happening here? You know?
Yeah. It's I feel like it's sort of trapped by its rating too, because it's PG. So it's like
Right.
if they wanted to do this thing that you suggested where it gets to the point where one of them gets so obsessive that they actually start murdering people, it would obviously be art. I think.
Yeah, depending on how they do it. I mean, in this one,
Well, 'cause, like, the way,
they
like,
have a trunk full of skulls. Like, they clearly have murdered people.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if you were gonna do that ending, like, you could have had it be like, well, because like the whole thing is like Art's wife is gone for the week visiting her sister. So like, what if you found out that he had murdered her? Just like Skip, the story he told them, and in point of fact, Art appears as Skip in Tom Hanks's dream.
Yeah, if they go to Art's house and there's a skeleton in there, and it's like, oh, have you met my wife? Like he doesn't even know act like she's dead or something.
Yeah.
Where you realize this whole movie he's been cracked, like he's just completely fucked.
Right, he's been gassing them up about these kind of weird, but
she's been
otherwise
dead
fine
for
people.
months.
Yeah. So, but like, I feel like that's you couldn't get away with that with a PG. So I feel like building it towards the natural ending where it's just like, oh, this is we were the what manner of monster is man. It does sort of kind of peter out, but like
I think you could though, because if you did a skeleton, because again, trunk full of skulls happens in this movie, right? So if it was just like a skeleton, like is Psycho R-rated? I actually don't know. I mean,
it's not. I mean, it's. I forget what it's rated, but it was like I think
this was back in the day where we didn't have PG-13, right?
No, and I think we didn't even have like PG or R at that point. I think like.
Oh yeah, I don't think Psycho has a rating.
I think Psycho was just sort of like mature or restricted or something.
They're like, don't. It was rated don't.
Yeah.
Don't. It's like, don't do it. Don't do it. I'm sure it has a rating now. Hold on.
Well, yeah,
stop the
it
podcast.
Must.
I'm IMDbing
What are
Psycho.
we doing here, Dave? What are we doing?
We're making a podcast.
Can we get on with
Yeah, it's R. It's R. Which is funny because it doesn't feel R to me. But the point is that like Jaws is PG. Like they could do something in this, I think. And I honestly really like the ending now where Art has been like a murderer the whole time. Like that's very funny to me.
Yeah.
As an ending, and it makes it punctuates it correctly, right? But by being like, oh yeah, the neighbors were in fact bad. And then it's just
really
like him at the end, like, don't mess with suburbanites. And it's like, I feel like this completely undercuts everything you just showed us.
The ending is and then like Corey Feldman looks right into the camera and says, I love this street. Man, this ending is like.
He pulls a Robin Hood Prince of Thieves and breaks the fourth wall in the last shot. And I was like, what the fuck? Yeah, it's weird.
It's weird. It's a weird ending.
Weird.
It's a weird instinct.
Yeah, so I think what they were trying to do is comically undercut it, meaning that I've seen movies and shows do this, right? Like I feel like South Park has done this a bunch of times where they, where they are like, oh, that's a stereotype, that can't be right, and then of course it ends up being one. South Park, I would say, doesn't do it great. But like that's a comedy beat, right? That's a thing where it's like just because someone is foreign doesn't make them evil, and then it's sure enough they're evil. But if they land into that, maybe, like then they maybe if it was like, oh yeah, but like we still learned our lesson, you know what I mean? Like they should. The problem is they don't learn the lesson too. They just go, oh okay, Tom Hanks is freak out. What he was wrong.
Yeah, we were totally right. We were actually totally right this whole time.
Yeah. And then and it's like it's weird without anybody pushing back, right? Without like Carrie Fisher saying like, no, you're not right. Like
no,
like statistically you're not right.
Yeah, this should not have happened.
Yeah, exactly. Like I could see a version where they're right, where it's still pointed out that like, no, they shouldn't be right. But it does feel to me like they weren't, like we said, there wasn't enough like they wrote a draft, maybe two, and then they were just off to the races, and then it didn't matter. You know, the improv, they weren't going to improv entire new scenes. They're going to improv little jokes. So that's what they did.
Mm-hmm.
But it does feel
I wouldn't
like,
be surprised if that was the case.
yeah, it's just interesting because it just doesn't quite feel done. The movie, it's like a little off. And at the time, according to interviews that I was reading, like with the director, with the Joe Dante and stuff, when it failed, they didn't think much of it. They were just like, yeah, you know, people make movies, they fail because they're not wrong. And he moved on, you know, he was like, all right, next project, that didn't work. And then it became a cult classic. And I'm wondering why it became a cult classic. And it's like a chicken or the egg, which is like, at the start of this, you asked if I liked it, and I don't think I asked you. Did you like it? Do you like this film?
Oh yeah, I answered that.
Okay.
I still like this film, and it's because I think Joe Dante's direction is so good in it.
Yeah, but yeah, that's the question. Is like, do I like this film because I just know this film because this film was thrust upon me, or because I didn't seek it out? Did you seek it out?
No. This film was foisted upon me by my parents. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. So like, something happened where this became a cult classic, and I don't quite know what, right? Like, at some point, our generation was shown it for some reason by a bunch of irresponsible adults, and it feels like it's our generation who grew up being like, yeah, The Burbs is great. And maybe it's because we weren't old enough to think about how weird the message was until we were older, and by the time we're older, we're like, well, I love the movie. So
yeah, it's already in there. What am I going to do?
Yeah, it's like Ghostbusters, where you grow up and you're like, wait, the EPA is bad in that?
The bad guy?
Yeah, that's the EPA ruining small businesses? Huh. That's a weird message. But it's too late. You're like, I love that movie. So
yeah.
And I would like to think that I would brush that aside if I was an adult. Like, yeah, it's silly, but it's a good movie. So I feel like I'm just like now trying to identify, like, why did this movie become a cult hit?
I think just because it was such a lovingly made homage to those old kinds of movies.
It really does have a lot of talent. Like,
yeah,
Joe Dante
this is a very well-made movie. It's just the script is pretty weak.
It really is. I also think Tom Hanks, you know, got famouser after this. Like, he was famous at the time.
Oh, yeah.
But this era of Tom Hanks is really interesting to me.
It's a different era. He's an asshole in this era.
Right.
Like, he played David Spade type characters in this era.
It's so weird because it's like, I was going to say it's like Paul Rudd, where it's like, then he eventually became famous. He still didn't become famous enough. It's like if Paul Rudd became Tom Cruise famous, right? Like, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's
like,
true, yeah.
Yeah, like he was a Paul Rudd type in this era. Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
Like, you could easily see if you had to remake Joe versus the Volcano, you could stick Paul Rudd in there. If you had to remake The Burbs, you could stick Paul Rudd in there. And then it's just like he exploded, and so probably everything. But at the same time, it's not like, you know, all early Tom Hanks movies exploded. But
No.
I think it's that combination of he elevated it, and then Joe Dante, is doing an amazing job.
The
here.
whole cast is in general pretty good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's always, I know Bruce Dern is in this. It always feels weird that he's in this.
He's pretty great in it.
He is. He's terrific. That scene where they're, in their house and he's like interrogating him.
Yeah.
Like the family.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's just, it's a very, I don't know. I wonder if it's also like, we just like our humor aligned more with this movie.
Yeah, it's odd. It's left of center for sure. It doesn't go for big laughs really. Like it's like there's a couple of laugh out loud moments, but mostly it's about like just kind of vibe and situation and like the chemistry of the characters in this ridiculous situation.
Right.
That I think is where most of the humor comes from, rather than like really great lines.
Yeah, it's mostly like charisma and moments where you're just like, oh, that's funny. And it's like, why is it funny? Like, I can't really retell most of the jokes in this, right? Like, they're not...
It's the situation. It's seeing three middle-aged men behave like kids on bikes in the summertime.
Yeah.
like convinced their neighbor is a vampire.
Right. There's like a little element of like we've all kind of known a version of these people.
Oh,
or
yeah.
a version. Like we know the vibes. We're all familiar with the vibes of what we're seeing here. This weird, paranoia and these middle-aged men hitting this crisis and then fucking losing their shit. It's just like I can definitely see in a bubble, like not like looking at this film and being like, this is fucking weird,
Yeah, it is a weird movie.
Yeah. And I'm looking at the writer and I'm like, oh yeah. I mean, I guess this is kind of about the people around it because this is the writer of George of the Jungle and Inspector Gadget. Two movies I would argue did not have Burbs level fame. Memoirs of an Invisible Man.
Oof.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, so it's not really the writing, is it? It's really not the writing. And the
Well, we
script
already identified that the script is bad.
Yeah, it really isn't though. Like, and so when I'm thinking about it now, I'm like, oh, maybe this was the final draft. Maybe this was what they landed on. Weird fucking movie.
It is. Man, it's that ending is bizarre.
It really is. When you really step back from it, it's like, what the fuck
It's
are
an
we
odd
doing here?
an odd message. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, he should have stripped naked and lit himself on fire.
Yeah, like Bug.
Yeah.
Spoilers for Bug.
Both movies end with a fucking
with
house going up in flames.
With the male protagonist blowing himself up.
Yeah. It's weirdly similar movies. Bug and the Burbs.
Bug and the Burbs.
Both B words. Yeah. I'm gonna make a video essay about this.
The Bergs.
The Bergs.
Yeah,
Listen, we're
out of stuff to say, I think.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Vincent, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Always good to go back and talk about the Burbs. Watch it again. It's just like breeze,
really delight in
breeze.
it. Splash around in 1989 again for a bit.
Yeah, hell yeah. Also, when Corey Feldman goes, I'm ordering a pizza. I was like, there's that Ninja Turtle.
Yeah.
Like, that's, oh man, yeah, you
There's
are
that
a
little
Ninja
twerp.
Turtle.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like this was the movie that someone watched and they were like, oh, we have to give him a Ninja Turtle. Because, my God, that voice. This is through our Patreon. What were you going to say?
I think it was just because he was a teen star at the time that they could get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that is some Ninja Turtle
That is a Ninja Turtle ass thing to say for sure.
Our Patreon, patreon.com/gamefully unemployed, GAMEFULLY unemployed. That's what this was through. We have a tier where you can have custom We Just Watched episodes. We also watch movies with our patrons. We also for $5 a month, we have exclusive podcasts. Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Fox Mulder's a Maniac. And then with the small beans, we do Star Trek: The Next Futurama and Spielboys. All available, $5 a month. Check it out. You'll love it.
Yeah. We also have a store. Head over to gamefullyunemployed.com where you can find a link to our Teespring store where we have all kinds of cool original artwork and designs you can get on t-shirts, mugs, stickers, posters, all sorts of things. So slap your little neighbor spying peepers onto that.
Yeah. And don't trust Whitey.
Definitely not. Certainly not suburban Whitey.
No, don't.